Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who are joining us from the US and Canada and from Israel and Europe and various parts around the world. My name is Rabbi Margie Stella, and I am an educator for Women's League for Conservative Judaism. I'd like to welcome you to our final installment of this year's Sichot beyn Achayot program, Midor Lador, taking the 100-year journey from bat mitzvah to egalitarianism. This program is made possible through a generous grant from Keren Kayemet L'Yisrael, Masorti Olami, and Merkaz Olami. Our goal in these three workshops is to work towards fostering a better mutual understanding between Israeli women and Jewish women in the diaspora. I would like to acknowledge and thank, before we begin, our international president, Debbie Kainer-Goldich, who is with us here today. And I want to thank Debbie because when we were trying to figure out our theme for this year, the first thing that she said to me was, since this is the 100th anniversary of bat mitzvah, I want you to do something on bat mitzvah. And so, Debbie, this is for you. And I'd like to, at this point, introduce our executive director, Rabbi Ellen Mullins-Fields, for some words of greeting.
Boker Tov to everybody. Actually, it's Tzaharayim Naim. I guess it is afternoon where I sit in New Jersey. Our offices are in New York City. It's so amazing to see so many people from all parts of the world with us today. Thank you, Rabbi Sella, for organizing all of this. You have done a superb job, and Yasher Kochech to you. And to the committee that worked with you, Diane Friedgut and Ellie Kremer, and our co-chairs of the Education Committee, Julia Loeb and Ellen Bresnik. Thank you to all of you, because nothing like this can take place in a vacuum. And also to all those who spread the word about this. There was information about our program in the Fuchsburg, Jerusalem newsletter, the e-blast, and also the Schechter e-blast. And of course, our staff in the office, Karen and Isabel, you've done a superb job. And another opportunity that we have to be able to study together our Israeli sisters and also our American and North American sisters is, of course, the Masorti Days of Study, which will be 3 different places: February 8th, Beersheba, February 14th, Kfar Saba, and February 27th in the north. Thank you, Diane, for organizing all of that. And God willing, Debbie and I will be able to attend some of those in person. But those of us who are not lucky enough to be in Israel, there will be parts of it that will be live streamed as well. And we thank you for supporting Giving Tuesday, which, even though that happened already, November 29th, that's just a date on the calendar. You can continue to Giving Tuesday, which goes to Masorti Days of Studies always. And it's really wonderful that we sit in different locations, but truly our hearts are together, studying Torah together. So I'm looking forward to our speakers, and especially to my teacher and my dean and my chancellor and my mentor and Rabbi, see, I just called you Rabbi, Chancellor Schwartz, who is one of those people who is a rabbi without the title. So thank you to you and to all of our speakers today, but especially my teacher, Dr. Schwartz. And I look forward to seeing our Israeli colleagues when we're in Israel in February. Toda Rabba, Rabbi Sella.
Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. Before we start, I do want to let all of our participants know that during the course of the program today, you may type any questions that you have into the chat for any of our 4 speakers. At the end of the program, we're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes for a question and answer session, which will be moderated by Rabbi Mullins-Fields. So the chat is open for you to enter those questions, and we'll be answering them all at the end of the program. At this time, I am very excited to begin today's conversation with a brief interview with Professor Alice Shalvey, prominent scholar and educator, and undoubtedly the most well-known leader in the fight for women's equality in Israel. Professor Shalvey, welcome once again. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to have you joining us again today, and this 3rd time in our series of 3 workshops. And I'd like to ask you a few questions about your contributions to the effort to bring about religious equality for Jewish women. Okay, so my first question for you is, in your memoir, Never a Native, you tell the story of the first time that you were called to the Torah for an Aliyah in 1979 in Milwaukee. Since it occurred at a Women's League Shabbat service, I'm sure that our audience would love to hear you describe the experience and how it affected you.
Thank you. Well, it's an interesting question, sort of made me think back into my religious journey. I was brought up in an Orthodox world, completely Orthodox, and not ultra-Orthodox. Modern Orthodox, I think, is the contemporary word for it. But certainly not one of equality between men and women. Separate spheres, separation in synagogue services, with women relegated to what in England is called the ladies' gallery, and playing no active role in the service, except that one is praying personally, individually, as part of a service. Then at one point, I was asked to serve as a scholar in residence for, I think it must be the Jewish Agency or whatever. And I was traveling to various American communities in order to lecture, mainly on women's status in Judaism in general, not just in Orthodox Judaism. That was my subject. And I actually was, I suppose I can say I was one of the first feminist activists in the Orthodox world, seeking for a greater role for women. And one of the places that I was asked to speak at was in Milwaukee, what was a Women's League Shabbat service. Was my first experience of an all-women's service. And at one point, the Gabbait came up to me and asked me whether I would like an Aliyah. I had never, of course, as an Orthodox woman, had an Aliyah to the Torah. And I was very anxious, worrying whether this was something legitimate for me to do. I looked around, I saw that there were no men present, so that I wasn't defying any law about mixed prayer. And I accepted the honor and found myself, for the first time in my life, I was 53 years old at the time, for the first time in my life, I, an observant Orthodox woman, was face to face with an open Torah scroll. I had never had that experience before, because I'd never been in a circumstance where women could accord to the Torah. And I was so overwhelmed by emotion that I burst into tears, actually. And when I made and people stared at me because it was a conservative community, it was a Women's League Shabbat, so I looked around to make sure there were no men there, and I wasn't defying that, particular prohibition about it being in a mixed minyan. And I was so overwhelmed that here was I, at the age of 53, for the first time in my life, looking at an open Torah scroll at close quarters. It had never happened before. And I burst into tears of emotion, of anger as well that I'd been denied this experience because I was a female. And when I finished and said the final bracha, I added a Shechianu, because for me, it was an extremely significant experience. Now, this was in a conservative community. The women didn't know what I was doing. Why was I so emotional about something which for them was a matter of course? And I think they must have first thought I was rather crazy, and only gradually realized that this was for me a significant first in my life. Since then, since I've moved from Orthodoxy to conservative Jewry, it has fortunately become a more frequent event. But I must say that whenever I'm called to the Torah, I still find it a very emotional experience.
Thank you for that beautiful description of an experience that I think so many of our membership can relate to. And I would venture to guess that in 1977, there were probably quite a few conservative women who had not yet experienced being called to the Torah for an aliyah. Absolutely.
I think from that point of view, the United States was well ahead of us.
Right, but we still had a long way to go in 1977, and we have come a long way since then. Yes, yes. Okay. So my second question, in the book, you also describe the new Talmud teacher you hired for the Pelech School in 1977. Her name was Beverly Gribetz. You thought she would be a good role model for the girls, but the male members of your staff did not quite agree and wanted you to dismiss her. I think the reason that they wanted you to dismiss her is very interesting in light of the speakers on our panel today. Can you tell us what their objection was and talk about how things have changed in Israel in the last 45 years?
Well, their major objection was, I hired her, by the way, she was a new immigrant, and she had studied at JTS, and I hired her as one of my staff for Jewish studies. Now, there had Talmud specifically. There had never been a woman Talmud teacher in an Orthodox school. I mean, there had been the outstanding example of a scholar, Nechama Leibovich, but she always said that, she couldn't compare herself with a man who'd had a proper rabbinic training. I would have begged to differ. But in any case, it wasn't done. There was no such thing as a woman teacher of Talmud. And I thought it would be a good idea if the girls saw a different model, that there was such a thing as a Talmud, female Talmud scholar, and I hired her. And I was confronted by a kind of rebellion from my male Orthodox, all my staff were Orthodox, my male staff members who demanded that I dismiss her. Why? Because she studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which they thought was something heretical. So I said to them, but she's observant, she's shomeret mitzvot. That's what interests us, not where she studied. Can't be. She can't be really shomeret mitzvot if she studied at JTS. So I said, okay, let's have a meeting. Let's meet her. You can confront her. You can ask her anything you want to ask her. And I want to prove to you that she's perfectly suitable for the Pelech School. So we had an evening, a staff evening, which I'm now so ashamed of that I permitted it to happen. But I felt so intimidated. So she was subjected to an evening of the most ridiculous questions, basic questions. You know, I remember one male staff member asking her whether she separates meat from milk. You know, very, very basic questions. And I must say, she was kept very cool. She answered the questions to the point, right? So much so that at the end of the evening, one of the major prosecutors, I would say, came up to me and said, and this is what really infuriated me, "You're quite right. She is observant, but you have to fire her." So I said, "But if she's observant, why do I have to fire her?" Because she studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and we can't have our girls thinking that an Orthodox person can study at a conservative institution. Now, can you see how absolutely ridiculous this was? Of course, I kept her on, I didn't listen to him, but at the end of the year, 3 of my male staff members, the main prosecutors, shall we say, in this public trial of Beverly Gribbis, resigned their positions. Beverly stayed on.
That's a wonderful, wonderful story to hear told, 45 years later. And we have made tremendous strides, as we will find out in just a few short moments. And I am happy to say that both I and Rabbi Wollensfield received our ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary.
Right.
And when I was studying at the Jewish Theological Seminary, I had a wonderful female Talmud teacher, Marjorie Lehman, who is a wonderful, wonderful scholar. She has a book that came out recently. In our last program, we had Judith Hauptman. It's amazing, amazing the strides that we have made in 45 years. But I think we're going to hear more about that from our next speaker. Professor Shalvi, I cannot thank you enough for your contributions to these 3 programs. And it was an inspiration to speak with you. It was an inspiration to read your book. And for those of you who have not read Dr. Shalvi's book, it's called Never a Native. It is very inspiring, and you will hear these stories and you'll read these stories and more in the book. I can't recommend it enough, and I cannot thank you enough. Toda rabah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's move on to our speakers. We're going to continue the conversation with 3 speakers who will be discussing the history of the advancement of equality for Jewish women, beginning 100 years ago with bat mitzvah. Our first speaker today is Dr. Shuli Rubin Schwartz, who is the first woman to be appointed to serve as the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. She will be followed by Sarah Lee Shrell-Fox, who is a chazanit and educator from Jerusalem, training all age groups from preschool up through rabbinical students. And our final speaker will be Rabbi Dikla Druckmann-Scherzer, one of 2 women rabbis who are currently serving the congregation of the Fuchsberg Center in Jerusalem. Each of these amazing women is a role model for us all. And now it is my distinct honor to introduce to you Chancellor Dr. Shuli Rubin Schwartz.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sella, for putting together this marvelous program. And thank you, Debbie Kaner-Goldich, the president of Women's League, which has just in sparking the idea, and for all the amazing work that you do on behalf of this organization. And just to thank you to you, Alice Shalvi, for your courage and your leadership, not only in the story that you told, but really through your entire career. You've been an inspiration to me and to so many other women over the decades, and you inspire us all. I, of course, can't think of a more fitting topic for a Women's League program than the evolution of Jewish feminism, because the evolution of Jewish feminism is mirrored in the history of Women's League itself. And while we are, the title of this begins at Bat Mitzvah, I, as a historian, of course, have to say that we have to go back before Bat Mitzvah, because we must first begin by exploring how, when, and if Jewish girls were educated, because education is the foundation of all of this. Formal Jewish education for women was rare before the modern era. During that time, girls usually learned what they needed to know Jewishly mimetically by watching their mothers, absorbing their practices, participating in the activities needed for living a full Jewish life. They learned prayers, the laws of kashrut, family purity, Shabbat and holidays, and the life cycle. They absorbed customs and traditions of their families and their communities. Some more progressive families made sure girls got some formal education. And as we will see over and over again, daughters of learned fathers often learned more, especially if there were no sons in the family. Chief among these learned women was the founder of Women's League, Matilda Schechter, wife of one of my predecessors, the second head of the Jewish Theological Seminary, Solomon Schechter. She was a brilliant visionary, savvy organizer, and magnetic personality. And to this discussion, she understood that conservative Judaism would flourish only if women were Jewishly educated. And she set out to ensure that this would happen. I'm just going to give two examples. First, when she first came to JTS, she was a music lover who loved tefillah, who loved davening, and she saw congregational singing as a vehicle to increase the engagement of both men and women. So she organized what was called a Society for Ancient Hebrew Melodies, and she co-authored a Hebrew hymnal. She helped inaugurate Shabbat religious services at JTS for men and women, services that one colleague recalled as so inspiring. They served as an example for congregations throughout the country. Then, of course, through the founding of Women's League, she initiated projects designed to enhance the agency of Jewish women to intensify Jewish observance in the home. She oversaw the preparation of what she called Kiddush cards, so that all the tefillot for the beginning a Shabbat meal would be ready on the Shabbat table. A collection of legends based on Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews, which was called Friday Night Stories, and several pamphlets on the Jewish holidays. All of this is essential groundwork for Bat Mitzvah, and ultimately for a commitment to egalitarianism. Women needed knowledge and tools. This was essential to build up their confidence and to empower them to deepen their Jewish lives and the lives of their families. Matilda Schechter's blueprint continued to guide the work and priorities of Women's League throughout the decades. This vision was reinforced by the example of her dear friend, Henrietta Zold. Zold, the eldest of 8 daughters, who was educated by her father, a woman whose knowledge of classical Jewish texts, Judaism, Jewish history, Jewish thought, Jewish literature was so deep that when she wanted to learn more after her father's death, the only place she could do so was the Jewish Theological Seminary. And so she convinced Solomon Schechter, her good friend's husband, to permit her to enroll at JTS as its first female student. Despite her prodigious erudition and leadership, Zoll did not consider herself to be a feminist, but her learning and comfort with Jewish ritual made it possible for her, as it did for Matilda Schechter, to begin to chart a more inclusive path for women in Judaism. For Zold, this was epitomized by the letter that she wrote, gently declining her friend's offer to say Kaddish for her mother. This was in 1916. She knew instinctively that she must say Kaddish for herself. As a single woman without children to care for or to comfort her, she knew she had to find her own way to claim her link with her family and to find her place within the larger Jewish community. And she knew that Kaddish would help her do so, as it had done for men for millennia. And so she wrote, "The Kaddish means to me that the survivor publicly and markedly manifests his wish and intention to assume the relation to the Jewish community which his parent had, and that so the chain of tradition remains unbroken from generation to generation, each adding its own link. You can do that for the generations of your family. I must do that for the generations of my family." By claiming the right for women to have equal access to a traditionally male ritual obligation, something she could authentically undertake because she was educated, not only in how to recite Kaddish, but in rabbinic law, she laid the groundwork for an egalitarian future. It is not surprising then that the first bat mitzvah occurred only 6 years later, only 4 years after Women's League founding. The first bat mitzvah also grew out of the soil of JTS. For Mordechai Kaplan, who arranged for the bat mitzvah of his eldest daughter, later Judith Eisenstein, served as the dean of JTS's Teachers Institute, an undergraduate college which had been founded by him in 1909 in large measure to provide a place for women as well as men to get an intensive Jewish education. It's also not surprising that Kaplan took this maverick step because he had 3 daughters and no sons. If he wanted the next generation of his family to fulfill what Zoll described, that is, to add their link to the chain of Jewish tradition, he needed to create a vehicle for them to do so. In mid-20th century America, Jewish education became almost synonymous with a Talmud Torah religious school education that culminated in bar mitzvah. Families wanted sons and daughters to be educated, and synagogues wanted them to stay involved until bar mitzvah age. Since conservative synagogues were educating boys and girls equally, and junior congregation typically engaged both sexes in prayer and Torah reading, it made sense to create a ceremony for girls similar to bar mitzvah. The form varied widely, but whatever form it took, it served an important function, practically speaking, because it ensured that Jewish education until the age of 13 became the norm in conservative Jewish life for girls as well as boys. I remember what it meant for me at the age of 13 to gather on a Friday evening in March for my bat mitzvah. I recited a haftarah that I chose out of a book, which was compiled for precisely this purpose. The haftarah that I chose bore no relation to the parasha of the week. I chose it for its inspiring theme and then gave it to our Torah about it. Naturally, I felt self-conscious in the way that any 13-year-old girl would have at the time. My clothing, my hair, I was getting used to wearing contact lenses and my eyes were sensitive to light, but I felt very proud to be able to achieve that moment and take that leadership role in public in front of the congregation. We know that bat mitzvah evolved over time as countless questions arose. What could girls do? Could it be on Shabbat morning? Could they lead tefillah? Could they recite the haftarah of the week? Could they be called to the Torah for an aliyah? More important was the question of whether this rite of passage would symbolize ritual equality with boys and the beginning of adult participation in synagogue ritual, or whether it was a one-off of gender equality just for the moment of the bat mitzvah ceremony. All of this got worked out over many years as conservative synagogues experimented with this innovation. For some young women, bat mitzvah incubated Jewish feminist leanings, either out of pride for mastering Torah reading, haftarah, and tefillah, or out of anger that the ceremony proved to be that one-off that sadly confirmed their sense of inequality. I wasn't thinking at all about feminism when I became bat mitzvah, but happily within a few years, a bold group of women a few years older than I were. Again, this new wave of feminism was fueled by education because by the mid-70s, many young Jewish women had an intensive education and experience in public ritual participation through Jewish day school education, Ramah, Jewish congregation, and in many college level programs that were open to them, not only JTS's Teachers Institute, but Hebrew colleges in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, Chicago, Cleveland. Many more women now possessed the knowledge and the skills to participate fully in Jewish life. In 1972, a core group went before the Rabbinical Assembly to advocate for increased role of women's participation in Jewish religious life, membership in synagogues, serving as shlichei tzibur. They called themselves Ezrat Nashim, an ironic term for this feminist organization. And they authored a manifesto, a call for change. I'll quote just one line: to educate women and deny them the opportunity to act from this knowledge is an affront to their intelligence, talents, and integrity. These views were shared by many others and led, thankfully, to a cascade of changes over the next few decades, including women's ordination as rabbis and then as chazanim. Also during this period, women began to think differently about what ritual ought to be for women. Should women simply adopt male garb, or should it be distinctly feminine? I remember pink tefillin, lavender silk talitot, woven head coverings. We also developed new rituals. The one that caught on very quickly were Simchat Bat ceremonies, and Women's League put together a kit very early on that suggested rituals and scripts as the Simchat Bat became very much interwoven into the lives of Jewish families. Feminism also led both men and women to look again at classical texts, at liturgy. This led to the inclusion of the Imahot in the Amidah, the discovery of special women's prayers from centuries earlier that had been lost to history. It inspired the creation of new midrashim that imagined the perspective of women in our tradition, whose voices were often non-existent. We began to find Jewish leaders, female leaders, that we never really thought about, some of whom, of course, were hiding in plain sight. That was the impetus for my own book on the rabbi's wife, the Rebbitzins in American Jewish life. Ultimately, feminism challenged American Jews as a whole to confront every aspect of Judaism: our classical texts, Jewish law, theology, learning, prayer, Jewish scholarship, and more. It enabled many more women to find a meaningful place in our tradition, unlocking their creativity and talents. We don't have to look far to experience the talents of women rabbis and female organizational leaders. My own appointment as chancellor is an outgrowth of this transformation. Finally, this transformation also taught us just how much good could come from widening the tent to embrace women. For this led us to recognize other areas of exclusion that had not been addressed. LGBTQ Jews, Jews of color, Jews marginalized by disabilities or age. In short, feminism proved to be the spark that has fueled a revitalization of Jewish life. Its profound impact reminds us just how important it is for every one of us to engage with our tradition and not to give up until we are able to draw meaning from it. Asking more of our tradition is not a sacrilege, but rather a sacred obligation. Only a tradition that is ever evolving in response to people's needs in every era will continue to replenish itself and flourish. And now I'm delighted to turn this over to Sarah Lee Shrell-Fox, who will talk about the evolution of bat mitzvah and egalitarianism in the state of Israel.
Thank you, Shuli. And thank you, Rabbi Margie Sella, for organizing. And a special thank you to Diane Friedgott, my dear friend and neighbor across the street, for inviting me to speak this evening. I benefit from all the hard work that came before me. I come from Minneapolis. Every conservative synagogue has always been egalitarian there. And growing up in the late 1960s and the 1970s, I grew up thinking that it was perfectly normal that girls learned exactly what boys did. And I learned how to read Torah and all of the sets of Ta'amim, as well as all of the davening by the time I was 18 years old. I could have gone to cantorial school then. I decided not to, but I've been teaching ever since. I learned as a bat mitzvah girl how to put on talit and tefillin, and we were taught in my conservative synagogue in Minneapolis to wear some kind of a head covering, kippah or doilies during those years, if you were having an aliyah or if you were participating in the tefillah, and all of that was completely normal. I didn't know that it was not normal until I left Minneapolis and saw on the East Coast how it was very traditional and not as egalitarian as it has become now. And I've been teaching bat mitzvah and women, as well as boys and men, since I was 16 years old. So it's over 40 years of teaching. And now I'm in Israel for 28 years, and my goal has been always to bring what I learned as a girl in Minneapolis to the Israeli girls here and their mothers that it should be normal and natural and with confidence and to find their voices. And that has always been my goal. In addition to bat mitzvah, I also teach rabbinical students nusach for ordination. And not only did I do my master's at JTS, at the Jewish Theological Seminary, but I also teach rabbinical students there now for about 9 years when they come to Israel and via Zoom. Before that, it was via Skype. And I also teach rabbinical students at Ziegler in LA, Summit Hebrew College in Boston, and now our egalitarian rabbinical school in Berlin, the Frankel School. And on top of all of that, I've been teaching the Israeli rabbinical students at Machon Shechter nusach for graduation. So I don't teach them how to become chazanim, but I teach them how to be strong shlichei tzibor or shlichot tzibor for their communities. And they have to learn all of the nusachim and all of the sets of ta'amim by the time they graduate. So it's been a wonderful adventure, a great job, and I feel like I've been pretty helpful to their growth as rabbis. So 28 years ago, we made Aliyah and we live in Jerusalem. And I would say that in the last 40 years here in Israel, girls and women have been able to read Torah and lead tefillah. We're a little behind where North America was. And my own daughters, for example, from 2005 until 2010, they also learned how to read from the Torah and to be shlichei tzibor for shacharit and musaf, and to know how to do kiddush for the shul. All of these skills that I grew up as it was so natural for me, and I wanted it to be natural for everybody, girls and boys across the line. And they really benefited from that. I think that when you're a Jewish educator, so I did some cantorial studies through EJL, which is the European Academy for Jewish Liturgy, out of London. And I completed cantorial studies there, but as a shlichat tzibor, not as a chazanit. And I find that to compare Israeli students with American bat mitzvah students, now that I've been here for 28 years, Israelis, first of all, read Hebrew a lot better. So we don't have to spend, as teachers, we don't have to spend as much time working on the Hebrew. However, because Israeli kids don't really know the vowels of Hebrew, when they learn how to read Hebrew, they learn it as a picture of words in context more than the vowels. So I find that we have to work on the vowels still, but it's an opportunity, to teach them a higher level of Hebrew and to watch the meteg, that little line underneath the words, which tells you where to stress the words, which is different than spoken Hebrew. So, but because Hebrew is natural for the Israeli students, it's a lot easier to work on the Hebrew with them. Most of the girls that I've taught over the last 28 years here, they don't have mothers who are role models. That's still a problem. I think less so in North America, but it is still a problem here. And it's a process. So we're still working on that. So I work hard kind of selling all of this to the mothers as well as to the daughters, and to make sure that the mothers' voices can be heard as well, and maybe do some of the learning on the side because they didn't have that opportunity, or it wasn't so natural for them when they were growing up here in Israel. And it's also nice when the mothers and the daughters can learn together. And also the fathers or the daughters learn as well. And I try to make it really as natural as possible when preparing for the bat mitzvah. So where in their household, I'm trying to make it natural. It's not very natural for them out in their Israeli world here, because there aren't so many places here in Israel, more so here in southern Jerusalem though, where it feels as normal as possible to be doing this. So I'm constantly working on that with the daughters and with the mothers and the family. I think over the years, the last 40 years here in Jerusalem, celebration of bat mitzvah went from just taking an aliyah at the Torah with the bracha to reading a couple of aliyot. That was a big deal. And then it went to a haftarah with the blessings before that and after that, which is even a bigger deal, to then leading some of the tefillah, and naturally starting with Seder Hotza'at Torah, So it's familiar to them. It's in the middle of the day of the tefillah, and they're at the limelight, and they can hold the Torah. We practice that in the synagogue before they do it, so make them feel comfortable with all of that. And then also Seder Hachnasat Torah, putting the Torah back. Those are the natural places to start. Certainly after that, especially if you're a Jewish educator, rabbi, cantors, kids, you will learn that more comfortably and lead more of the service. But I have definitely taught some girls who are not daughters of Jewish professionals, and it's a real pride and nachas to see how they love it and how it's natural for them. And I feel like they're my own kids when I see that happening, and it's really lovely. Also, giving a drasha has also evolved over the years for the kids, not just, you know, a man or a woman, but now for a bat mitzvah girl to give a drasha, even just to put that together with me, or I encourage it with a parent, or with their rabbi. And then the final thing that has transpired is then that girls can read a full kriyah, the full Torah portion. That's a huge deal. And there are plenty of girls who are doing that. We have a number of conservative Masorti shuls here in the country, and in Jerusalem in particular. And I think every one of them are now fully egalitarian, where they can lead anything and read anything. But that's been a process that's gone from certain people walking out of the service, men in particular, because they were so uncomfortable with that. And that's in our generation. That's so recent, to now it's just becoming more natural, and the community needs it and wants the girls to do that, and they embrace them. So I wanted to go on to say that what I find myself giving these girls and some of their mothers is confidence in finding their voices, very important. And even if they don't have a great voice, to teach them to be confident with their voice, because not all guys have nice voices either. It's not about how good the voice is, it's about the confidence in your voice. And I think I give even the Israeli girls confidence in their Hebrew reading. And I give them an education on where prayer comes from, because some of them don't really learn about that, or the themes and the stories in each of the Parshiot in the 5 books. I try to give them this time for them to think of questions that they might want to ask me about Judaism, or about tefillah, or about women in all of this. And then finally, I hope to give them tools to make this their own, so that they own this, so that they can read and they can lead again. So I'm the kind of teacher that I'm not going to color code the ta'amim. I want them to learn the ta'amim. I don't want them to memorize it. And even at the end, right before their bat mitzvah, I have them look at a new page that they've never worked on before, just to sing and see what they can do. And they always are impressed that, wow, I can do this. The Torah reading as well as a haftarah. What I want to conclude with is what I think we still need to work on here in Israel, and for sure, I think in the world, but here in Israel, is that we as role models and teachers, we still need to show confidence and to get out of our comfort level, because for some of us, it's not so comfortable for us even today, but to do it anyway, and to be more confident, because there are still many mothers out there, and then therefore daughters, who just don't own these skills. They don't own these tools. And we really have to go out of our way to teach them this, including wearing a talit, wearing a kippah, wearing tefillin, to really teach them about it and not be embarrassed about it, and to really give them the tools. I think we need to encourage these girls and the women to be keeping the mitzvot, encourage, wearing a kippah or head covering, talit and tefillin. I think we need to be loud and strong singers. That's our voice. We have to really put it out there as daveners and as Torah readers. I think except for Camp Ramah in North America, as well as here in Israel and some shuls, I think men and boys are still looked at as being the stronger ones and more authentic, let's say. And we still have that to work on, because that's not necessary. It should be more egalitarian, and I think we need to spend a lot of time on that. I think it's great to see women rabbis in Israel, women rabbis and cantors in North America. And it's amazing that we have our first female woman chancellor, Shuli Rubin Schwartz, and I think that we are doing great, and it's still a process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah Lee. And now let's move on to our third speaker. I just want to remind you all before we hear Rabbi Scherzer that you can enter your questions into the chat. And in just a little while, we'll be going to the Q&A part of the program, at which point questions can be directed to any of our speakers. And without any further ado, let me introduce our final speaker, Rabbi Dikla Druckmann-Scherzer.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Margie Sella, and thank you all of you for being here and making it happen. It's really amazing for me to speak about bat mitzvah because it's part of my personal path to be part of conservative Judaism and to be a rabbi. And the first step was when I was close to be bat mitzvah. I was about to be 12. It was 1997. Now we can know how old I am. And I was part of a secular family, not religious, not Masorti, really regular secular family in Israel. But my mother knew enough to ask me if I want to do bat mitzvah and if I want to do an Aliyah Torah. It was years ago. And I knew no one to do that. Boys didn't do bar mitzvah in my age. We were all 12 years old in my age group. So boys didn't do their Aliyah Torah yet. And I didn't know any girl who did such a thing. And I think I was smart enough as almost 12 years old to ask my mother, you know what? I have no idea what it means to do an Aliyah Torah. Can you just take me to see? And then I'll decide. And then we walked into a shul. It was my first time, at least the first time that I remember walking into a shul. And I remember two things. One is the comfort idea of being part of a home, of a congregation. People are so nice and they don't know me. I don't know them. My first time there. And like, oh, hello, welcome. How are you? Who are you? You can sit here. Here's a tidur. We're in page this and that. There was something so meaningful and so welcoming and so warm that I immediately wanted to be part of this thing. And the second thing that I remember feeling is, what the hell is going on? Because I'm Jewish, I'm learning in school, I'm part of, I'm an Israeli Jewish girl, but I sit in shul and I have no idea when to get up and when to sit down and what happens when the chazan or chazanit are silenced and then going to another place and someone is saying, we're in page this and that. And oh, okay, thank you. And I know Hebrew, but I don't get the Hebrew of the davening at all. And I think to myself, how come this is my masoret, my tradition, my heritage, and I have no idea what's going on. So holding this warmth and congregational feeling, and also the feeling that it's supposed to be mine, but it doesn't feel like it. I said to my mother, yes, I'm all in. Let's do a bat mitzvah. Let's see what it means. And then I became part of this congregation in Ra'anana, and eventually part of the Masorti movement in Israel. And of course, I learned my Aliyah Torah. For me, it was clear that's what we do in this congregation. I knew no other things. So I prepared my maftir and my haftarah and my dvar Torah, and I did parts of the tefillah. I was shlichat tzibur in part of it, and it was really exciting for all of my family. And this was part of my path towards being more Jewish and part of the Masorti movement. And I think this is my story, but it's also a story of a lot of other women in Israel, also men and women, but a lot of women in Israel, that the first encounter that they have with the Masorti movement and with Judaism and with the idea of congregation, being part of a kehillah, is through their bar and bat mitzvah. And it's something that boys are, like most boys will do bar mitzvah and some sorts of aliyah Torah in Israel. Masorti, not Masorti, religious, less religious. It's something that most of the people are just doing. But for girls, it's a choice. And it's a big choice. Because usually they will look left and right and see no one else doing that. It's a choice of becoming part and doing things that other girls are not doing. And I found myself becoming a rabbi and teaching bnot mitzvah and also bnei mitzvah. And I learned that my bnot mitzvah are really special, special girls, because the girls that choose to take their own path, no matter what their friends are doing. And this is such an age of looking around and looking at my friends and trying to be, the same and part and not do anything too drastic or different. But these girls are coming and deciding to be part of this process. And it's a process. It's not something that it's easy for them, even though I teach bnot mitzvah in Israel. Hebrew is their language, but the language of tefillah is not their language a lot of times. Usually they come from secular homes, and it's their path towards Judaism that I have the ability to give them what I've been given in my bat mitzvah, and teach them not only how to do the aliyah Torah, but also what is talit and what is tefillin, and what is shul, what a shul looks like, what's supposed to be in a shul, what is ner tamid, and what does it mean to be bat mitzvah and being part of mitzvot and part of Judaism and part of congregation, and how does it feel to hold a sidur tefillah and see that it's sidur, it has a order. It's something that if you look into, it's not gibberish, and it's not something that is so frightening and different and not for me. It's something that you can feel at home with. And that's part of our job as educators, as rabbis, as chazaniot, to also be a role model for these children, because when they see me and they see me doing these things, they see, and okay, so it's possible. So women can do that. So women can wear a kippah and can lead tefillot and can be a rabbi, and it's so, so important. And I want to tell you a story about, I've been a rabbi for a lot of years in Congregation Magen Avraham in Omer. I did my internship there as part of my rabbinic internship, and then I came back as the rabbi of the congregation for a few years. And we have program for bnei and bnot mitzvah. And people ask me, okay, so what is the plan for the bnot mitzvah? And I said, what do you mean? We have bnei and bnot mitzvah program. Yeah, but for girls, what the girls are doing? Everything that the boys are doing. We're teaching 101 every bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah kids. And we also are teaching in a group. And they're being taught the same materials of what it means to be Jew and what it means to be a bar and bat mitzvah. And they having a joint group together, boys and girls. And also they have 101 to study, each one their own haftarah and maftir and sermon. And also they are leading in Magen Avraham in Omer, all the tefillot in Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat, Arvit, Shacharit, Musaf, taking the Torah out and back, everything. And people like, so boys and girls, yes, they can do the same thing. But still there's a difference, because when I'm sitting with a group of both girls and boys, and I'm asking a question, then of course the boys will have something to say. And girls usually do have some things to say, but they are more shy. It takes them usually longer. And I've learned there's few really small things that I can do in order to make them speak more. And it happens in all the bar and bat mitzvah programs that I've taught in a few places, but also when I came to schools to teach in Tali education program. And I came to schools for the age of 12 and 13 and other ages as well. It's always the same. I ask a question, and in 3 seconds, there are 10 hands of boys raising hand because they have something to say. Usually no girls, maybe one, maybe, usually no. And then I say, in Hebrew, it's different than in English, because in English, whatever I say is for boys and girls together. But in Hebrew, I say, מישהי או מישהו רוצה או רוצה לענות. And I refer to girls and not just to the boys, because when you refer to everyone in English, in Hebrew, you usually refer to the boys. The general way of speaking is speaking to the boys. And you see in researches, then when you refers to girls, they say, oh, it's for me. And they answer much more. And also I take 1 minute more, because if I wait sometimes just 1 minute, then I'll have 2 or 3 more hands of girls. And if I give them a bit of a strength and I say, oh, I saw you there, Ilana, I saw that you said before something really important. Can you say it out loud again? Or can you show all of them the piece that you just made it? I looked at before, it's really great. And then you see the nachat on their faces, and they're all in and say, oh yeah, of course, I can say that and I can do that. And they have their place. So I learned that, unfortunately, still in the society today, we need to make place for the girls, for the women. They are not taking their place the same way that the boys are learning from the age of 0 to just, it's okay being me, saying what I have to say, doing what I have to do. And girls are much more shy, and they will think twice and 3 times before they raise their hand, and it's harder to get them all in. But being a woman is also a strength there, because girls feel more convenient when I'm speaking to say more what they have to say, to participate much more. And when I give them a few more minutes or encouragement or other things, that they're becoming part no less than the boys. But it's something that I learned. It's really important to be aware all the time and address. It's something that I have to address actively in order to make them take their place. And it's something that I think all educators have to know and practice and see the outcomes. And it's really important these days. And hopefully in a few years, we will not have to do that. But now we still have to do that in order to make the girls part as the boys. And when I thought about becoming a rabbi, and I was really afraid how to do that with a family and being a woman rabbi in Israel, it's really hard. And I was struggling with this idea. And then one bat mitzvah girl showed me that that's my path. And I had the privilege of knowing her when she was really, really shy in the beginning of the process of the program. And she couldn't even, she was sitting like this with her peers in the group of Bnei Mitzvah. And when we asked questions, she was like, yes, no, so quiet. We couldn't even hear it, and no more than yes or a no for a few months. And then after almost a year of teaching her 101, and she had the amazing questions, and she was so knowledgeable and curious, but she didn't do that in front of the other kids. And she became more and more open with the other kids as well. And there, her bat mitzvah came, and she was standing there, like I said, leading all services in Shabbat. And she was so shy, but she stood there like she owns it. It's hers. And I saw her parents sitting like this, amazed, couldn't believe that this little shy girl of theirs is just standing there like this, performing, leading the whole congregation in such a way that they were shocked. And when I came out of this bat mitzvah, I said to myself, well, if that's part of what a rabbi in Israel do, then for all means, I'm gonna be a rabbi, with everything that comes with it, the good and the bad things, because I want to be part of doing exactly things like that. And when I was teaching in program of bar and bat mitzvah for kids with special needs, part of the Masorti movement in Israel, then I figured out that it's also opening other paths. Like Rabbi Shuli said, that when you look at women and you make place for women as part of Jewish life, you also make place for other people from all sorts of all types and all. So being Masorti movement in Israel, they have a special program for a wonderful program for kids with special needs. And in these schools, there are boys and girls studying together. And when we're addressing the school and saying, well, who wants to be part of this program? Then all the boys are becoming part. So the girls are becoming part as well, just because it's an option. And then in the ceremony of Bnei Mitzvah, they are all doing it together, one after the other, and singing together and participating. And the girls do everything that the boys does. And it's something that you see the parents are so, some parents tell me, I never thought I would be told Mazal Tov on this child. Because it's really hard being a parent for a kid with special needs, and giving them the opportunity to celebrate bar and bat mitzvah. It's also something that the door was opened for it when we opened the door for women. We opened a lot of doors, important doors, and it's amazing. So now I'm leading as a rabbi the new congregation in Fuchsburg Center that is looking at families and girls and kids and making place for everybody together. And we're trying to change the words, each one of us in their own place and path, in order to make room for women and for everybody to become part, to be more close, to feel connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Scherzer. We're now going to move to the question and answer part of the program. So I'm going to ask Karen Belena to bring up all of our speakers on the screen, as well as Rabbi Ellen Mullins-Fields, who is going to be the moderator for the Q&A part of the program. And I'm going to hand it off to her.
Thank you so much. What inspirational speakers. Thank you so much. Many of you I have met. I've studied with. Many I haven't met yet. So I look forward to doing that. Sarah Lee, my mother, and I once met you at Fuchsburg many years ago. So Rabbi Dikla, I hope in the future we can meet. February, I'll be there. So just a few things that I wanted to add. And also, as I sifted through the questions that I received, trying to figure out in what order I should do this. Okay. So I'll start with the one as the Mar D'Atra, the rabbi who makes decisions at Women's League. The concept of Mar D'Atra is that the rabbi of your community has been elected as your community and makes those decisions that should apply to your community specifically. So there was a question in the chat about whether or not in the United States, some women wear a talit, but they don't necessarily have to wear a kippah. What do I think? I mean, what do you all think? Not going to answer that question because it's up to the Mar D'Atra of your community to decide what they want to do. So it's not a standard, if you wear a talit, you have to wear a kippah. If you're on the bima, you have to do this. It's up to each Mar D'Atra of the community. Sarah Lee, I think it was you who said something about confidence in their voices. And I just wanted to share, I'll take 1 minute to tell a story, that whenever my first Conference of Presidents mission, wherever you went, there was a security pass and they would say to you, do you have a weapon? And I really, with my chutzpanit, like Brooklynite, coming from Brooklyn and being Israel, I really wanted to say to the security guard each time they said, do you have a weapon? I wanted to say, yes, my voice, because our voices are our weapons. It's not just how we sing, but how we use our voice. And I think that all of you here have shown that. both Sarah Lee, it'd be nice if we all had pleasant voices to listen to, but not all of us do. But we can definitely use our voices to promote good, whatever needs to be progressed. So here's one question for Sarah Lee. And I'll probably ask a few and then you can decide how you want to answer them. Do most of the girls that you teach, Sarah Lee, continue with their involvement in Jewish ritual after their bat mitzvah? And just an observation, Celia said that, Dikla, she loved your presentation. That's exactly how she felt on her very first visit to a synagogue, which happened when she was much older. Your description was simply brilliant. Thanks. And I think that for all of us, no matter where we live, we need to take that description to make our synagogues more welcoming. And as we had said, women have paved the way for other groups. It's appropriate that Women's League for Conservative Judaism and Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs together is putting to a inclusion booklet to teach communities how to make their communities more welcoming. Was noted that girls and women aren't shy when they're the only ones in the room, and that is why we have Women's League for Conservative Judaism. That's why we've had close to, over the past 3 years, probably 300 women have studied Hebrew, which they may have had the opportunities in their own communities, but I think just the atmosphere of teaching together is great. Yes, I know you haven't gotten to ask a question yet. Me to say it. I just want to tell you all what people are saying. So in one community in Rehovot, they said that it's infrequent, the bat mitzvah, and how do you reach out to the girls? And those are the questions I had. Let me just read no, I didn't have those. I read them. These other questions that we have. So how do we reach more girls? And, okay, Rabbi Dr. Shalvi, where else were women allowed to study back then? I didn't think the Orthodox seminaries allowed women. And the question to Dikla, Rabbi, you're amazing, inspiring for others who still struggle and in difficulties you face with the authorities in Israel. That's always a good question. And is there any response to the impact of the celebration of the adult bat mitzvah in the US and Israel? And I just want to put a plug in for all those who may not know or do know that at our convention, the Women's League convention in July, 40 of our women who've been studying for the past 3 years for their adult bat mitzvah will be celebrating all together with their sisters. Alice, Dr. Shalvi, you spoke about the Orthodox assuming that conservative Jews aren't observant. Unfortunately, that's often still true, not always. A story from Linda, when I took a turn teaching the bar bat mitzvah class in our shul in Rehovot, one of the boys in the class of 10 boys said, "Where are the girls?" It took a moment to get that he thought that boys and girls are equal. Well, that is a wonderful story. It's like the story of all of us who are female rabbis, and somebody comes to you and says, "Can a boy be a rabbi too?" My son asked me that when we were living outside of Lakewood, New Jersey. And Rebecca, Bezrat Hashem, she'll be celebrating her 72nd anniversary of her bat mitzvah in Beit Shemesh, November 4th, 2023. It's her second bat mitzvah. The first was in 1953 in Denver. And also about Ellie Kremer, who helped organize this program. Saturday morning bat mitzvah in 1965, she had it with Rabbi Kripke. And she was able to read the Maftir portion, have an aliyah, and lead Musaf, and read the Haftarah. And that's why you're so involved today. Rabbi Kripke knew that after my bat mitzvah, it would take many years until I could have another aliyah, but his female congregants would be prepared. So how do we continue this? How do we continue having girls involved? I think it was Rabbi, you all said that 12, 13 is such a difficult age for girls. They just, I'm blessed to have a girl who doesn't care, and she just wears her talit wherever she goes. She was very active in Women of the Wall when she was there. But there are many girls out there that they wear it for their bat mitzvah and they don't afterwards, and they don't want to continue. So how do we continue that involvement?
I'll make a comment. I think that some of our schools in Southern Jerusalem, anyway, the modern Orthodox schools that allow girls to read Torah on a Monday and Thursday morning, and that would be like the Shabbat Parsha, you know, before their bat mitzvah. Also, like my older daughter went to Evelina, and I had two other daughters who went to Hartman Girls, and they all got to read Torah on a Monday or a Thursday. And I think that when the schools keep that going, and then if there isn't a bat mitzvah the following year on that date, if they would make sure to get the one who did it last year to keep them going, I think that's one thing that could be worked on. I don't know who does that, but that's just an idea. And in the shuls, I would say probably not even half of the students that I work with actually really continue doing this. And that's because they're teenagers and because they don't really have anybody who is in charge of making sure that that happens. So I think that the rabbis that we do have in our Masorti shuls should make note of that and make sure to invite them to read another one, like soon after their bat mitzvah, you know, get them to read a mincha Shabbat afternoon or a one aliyah on a Shabbat morning as soon as possible to keep them going. I don't think that I can really do that as their private teacher because the job is over, except if I see them because they live in the same community, then that's easier. So those are just some of the thoughts that I have, if any of you want to respond.
I would like to comment about the question, how do you get to more girls? Because it's really hard. And I feel the only really good answer that I have is when girls are doing Aliyah Torah and other girls and boys from their school, class, friends are coming. And this is something you see more these years because a few decades before, girls just didn't invite anybody, just their family, but not their friends. They were too shy or embarrassed and nobody knew what it means. And now I see that girls that are doing bat mitzvah, they invite everybody. And their class are coming, the classmates. And then the other girls are seeing what happens and what it means and how fun is it and how memorable and mashmauti, meaningful. And then we noticed that there are a few schools that started with just one or two bnot mitzvah, and now in each year we have a few, and we have a few more each year because they're all coming to one another's tkasim to celebrate together, and they want to be part of these things. So I can publish and I can come to schools and I do all of that, but just coming to visit, to be part of a bat mitzvah of other girls is the best way to bring more girls. So as more as we do more tkasim and celebrate more bnot mitzvah, there will be more bnot mitzvah that will come for this tkasim and say, okay, maybe it fits for me too. I need to make sure and learn more about that.
Beautiful, thank you. And it's interesting when you both speak about the bat mitzvah ceremony, that you don't talk about the party. In America, it was often, and maybe in Canada too, I'm just familiar with the USA, that it was all about the party. But now you're saying it's about the ceremony, and it's exactly what it should be about. And it really encourages others to see that the ceremony is so meaningful.
But I want to say something more. It's not just the ceremony. The ceremony is the end of a long process of learning how to become part of something and make it your own. In some shuls that I know, people can teach boys, sometimes girls, just how to read from the Torah, for example. But they are not becoming part of the shul. And now they're not becoming familiar and comfortable with being part of the Knesset and congregation and when we have something that is not just teaching them what to do, but teaching them how to become really part of it and have their voice and study and explore and try new things and feel convenient with the Judaism and with the congregation, becoming really part, then that's the main thing and not the service.
I'll add to
Beautiful.
something that Dikla just said is that I think that these girls should go on the minyan list of the shuls so that they can come and help make minyan for kaddishes. A lot of schools don't have school on Friday mornings, but there are a lot of minyanim that our Masorti shuls will have. So that's a perfect opportunity instead of sleeping late is to come and make minyan. So I think that we should encourage that. It was something I never thought about before. But another thing was getting those girls to learn Megillat Esther right after their bat mitzvah, so that they're learning a new set of ta'amim and they can go right into doing something for the synagogue.
And that is a suggestion that we can use in North America too. That, you know, there's so many, unfortunately, the Shiva minions all the time. And once my children used to go with me when I was a congregational rabbi to the Shiva minion, that was for the suites. But once Cameron was of the age, my daughter came with me to help with the minion as well. And that's something that all of our communities can truly do. Dr. Shalvi, were there any other schools in Israel in the 60s and 70s where women can study Talmud at that time? We just need to unmute you. Oh, she's not unmuted. And I know her answer is brilliant.
Yeah.
Dr. Shalvi, do you know how to unmute yourself?
In the kibbutz,
Okay, good.
Yes, in the kibbutz movement, the religious kibbutz movement, the girls had a bat mitzvah ceremony, which involved also a sort of equivalent of Aliyah Torah or giving a Dvar Torah. But I don't know of any other Orthodox framework that does anything comparable. In the conservative movement, of course, and the reform movement, I'm assuming, I'm not familiar enough with the reform movement, I'm just assuming, the girls would have a proper bat mitzvah like the boys, being called to the Torah, reading from the Torah. But I think that in the modern Orthodox community, it would only happen if there were a separate women's minyan. It would not happen at a regular mixed minyan, because there isn't equality at a regular mixed minyan. You know, that's so why should there be equality for the girls? Altogether, I don't feel that equality in religious life is something that Jewish girls feel passionate about, or Orthodox women feel passionate about. Not enough. I think that's the trouble, that Jewish Orthodox feminism is not seeking equality. It's seeking a certain status, a sort of separate but equal status, but not equality within the community as a whole. There you get continued distinction between what the men can do and what the women can do. I think it's going to take a long time before there's a change in the, even in the modern Orthodox community. I may be mistaken, because I'm really no longer a member of the modern Orthodox community. I now define myself more as a conservative Jew, and there, of course, there's no problem with equality. The women and men enjoy total equality as far as Aliyot Torah, as far as training for the rabbinate is concerned. And I'm very happy to see that an increasing number of women are going into rabbinical studies, because I think that's where the real change or revolution, maybe too strong a word, but the real positive change will happen when there are a significant number of women rabbis who enjoy the kind of authority and respect that most male rabbis enjoy, and we're not there yet, I think.
Thank you. And we are very glad that you consider yourself part of the conservative Masorti community, because we are honored to have you there. And as many have said in the chat, this is holy work. This is truly Kedusha. And if you could see yourselves as a Neviah, a prophetess, where do you see us going in the future, especially Chancellor Schwartz? Where do you see, what else do we women have to do?
Well, I'm a historian, not a prophet.
Well,
So,
humbly, where do you see us going in the next 100 years? What else do women have to do?
May I say, I think in this respect, there's a great difference between the United States and Israel, because you're so much ahead of us. You've accomplished so much, which we're still far from accomplishing. There's still, in the religious sphere, women are still inferior. We don't have women dayanot. We now have women pleaders in the rabbinical courts, but as long as all the judges are men, there's clearly discrimination. Yes. So a lot still has to be changed, because you're very lucky. You don't have an Orthodox establishment. You don't have a chief rabbinate that lays down the rules, right? Anything goes. I mean, anything goes in the sense of reform, conservative, Orthodox, all enjoy equality. Each of those types of Judaism has its place, has its following, has its leaders, but it's not the case in Israel. The only recognized form of Judaism is the Orthodox, completely different situation, which I don't know how capable you are of realizing what the effect of this monopoly of orthodoxy on religious life, which is very harmful, because a lot of people who feel attracted to Jewish traditions, I make this distinction between traditional Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, find themselves not accepted by the Orthodox establishment. I'm thinking of people, who observe, who hold a Friday night dinner, there'll be Kiddush, and there may or may not be Birkat Hamazon, but they don't go to synagogue, and they're not considered Orthodox or even genuinely Jewish by the Orthodox establishment. You see, the trouble in Israel is the religion is mixed with politics. That's really what's at the root of the evil, is that we have religious parties whose whole aim in life is to make life more orthodoxly Jewish and to exclude the reform movement, the conservative movement, which are not considered genuine. So that if you want to be, it's a very, very interesting distinction. You can be married by a non-Orthodox rabbi, but you can't be divorced anywhere except in a regular religious beyn. So it's a strange mixture of state control and individual movement control. Israel is unique in many respects, unfortunately, in this respect as well.
Thank you. And that is actually the whole point of our discussions, Sichot beyn Achayot, that we have discussions between the women in North America and outside of North America and Israel and other places, so we can learn from each other and see the similarities and the differences. And Rabbi, all the rabbi that have been on here have told us that. Dr. Shalvi has definitely informed us how things are different in the North American sphere and in Israel. And Dr. Schwartz, would you like to add something, please?
Yes, this situation in Israel is challenging, and painful and is so different in scale and type from what we have in the United States. However, I must say that the question of authenticity, the challenge of authenticity, the challenge of helping all Jews, women, and then broaden there, all Jews, to step up and take ownership over their Jewish engagement. That remains. That is a challenge that crosses the oceans. That's a human challenge, right? So we may have we don't have a Rabbanut that is limiting the potential and the ability for the kinds of work that we want to do, and yet the human the drive to really make Judaism our own is something that remains a challenge for American Jews. It's a different kind of challenge, but that is a challenge that we share.
Thank you. Thank you for all of our insightful reflections today, Rabbi Sella.
Thank you, Rabbi Wollens-Fields. Thank you to all of our wonderful speakers today. This is obviously a program that a conversation which we could continue for hours. The stories that have been told by all of our speakers are just fascinating, and the knowledge base from this group of women is absolutely phenomenal. We have, as Jewish women, made tremendous strides, and let us continue that forward for the next generation and generations of Jewish women, that they should have all the opportunities that they want to be able to do whatever they want, both in the United States and Israel and everywhere in the world. I would like to thank all of those who helped me plan this program today. My committee was comprised of Executive Director Rabbi Ellen Wollens-Fields, WLCJ Israel Chair and Mothers of Olim Coordinator Ellie Kremer, WLCJ Israel Liaison and Organizer of Women's Study Day Diane Friedgut, and WLCJ Co-Education Chairs Julia Loeb and Ellen Kaner-Bresnik. And a huge thank you to our very talented tech wizards, Karen Belena, who is with us on the program today, and Isabel Luksher, who is not with us right now, but did a lot of work behind the scenes preparing for today. And without their expertise, this program would not have run so smoothly. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank each and every one of our presenters, and let's continue the journey.